All right, it's a morning show, and my guest this morning, I am honored, and we've been talking about this all week. Jerry Stiller, really the legendary comedian Jerry Stiller, is on the show with us. Good morning, Jerry.
How are you, Parker? I'm here in New York, and I'm talking to you up there, and I'm thrilled to be able to be talking to my New England people.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I am. It was funny because the journey to finally get you on the show, my friend. I'll tell you what, we actually gave away a bunch of aluminum Festivus poles during the holidays.
Oh,
This is a true story. There is a book that we had found and a company that were making Festivus poles. And we're like, you know what? Let's just give away a bunch of Festivus poles. And then I'm like, why don't we get Jerry Stiller on the show? And I'm like, come on, this isn't going to happen. And we finally did it. So,
well, well, that poll really, has put me on the map in a lot of ways. I had no idea that the hardware stores today, get orders for poles, and they are in some homes they're very undecorative. They just stand there,
right.
And people dealing with that holiday, and it symbolizes, the commercialism that has taken over most of our lives today,
Sure.
especially during the holidays. And it's a way to really recognize what's going on inside you. You look at that pole, and you somehow get in touch with something in your brain at that point that
Sure.
takes you into the meaning of what the holiday is.
Now, we were before we went on the air. Jerry and I were kind of talking off air, and I had mentioned to him that I had watched some clips of you on the Ed Sullivan Show, and to be able to be part of that era, Jerry, and still continue to work today is pretty phenomenal. I got to be honest, that's pretty phenomenal. Your career really has spanned so many decades. Upon reflection, what are some of the highlights of your career? Would you say?
Oh, this is one of them right now that I'm alive and able to do the thing. And
Sure.
having Ann on that silvermirror.com thing,
Sure, yeah.
which is coming off now. Well, I guess the beauty of being around is that you have touched or have been touched by some of the best people that you can ever imagine in this business
Sure.
who pushed my buttons, And I'll tell you one. One was we got a call less than 30 years ago from L.A. Times, and they said, Jerry, we'd like you and Ann to know that Groucho Marx would love to have you over for dinner.
Wow.
And I said, what? Who else is coming? No, just you and Ann.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a cook from the L.A. Times. They're going to make food, and Groucho would love to be there with you. And I thought it was a joke. But anyway, we arrived at Groucho's apartment, and for the first time in our life, there was this guy, this wonderful guy. He was a legend in my life.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, really, all those movies, Duck Soup and The Night at the Opera.
Well, I was going to ask you if he served duck soup there.
Oh my God! I mean, and so he said, "Hello." He says, "Hey, He said, "I always admired you people. How long you been married?" I said, 20 years, Groucho. He says, "Why?" Anyway, he said, "Tonight we're going to watch A Night at the Opera. We're going to have dinner." And well, I said, "Oh my God!" Well, he had a 16 millimeter machine. We finished dinner. He told me to put out the lights, and he's played A Night at the Opera. And I never forgot watching Night at the Opera when I was a young guy, and how during that Depression, how
Sure.
tough things were,
Sure.
and that people who were watching that movie were, when you left that place, you were elated. You lost your feelings of depression and sadness that you were out of work. My father was a New York City cab driver. He was unemployed. He was working on the WPA. Anyway, I'll never forget how much it affected us. So the movie's over, and he said to me after they put out the lights, what'd you see? What'd you feel? And the thing that amazed me was I didn't laugh once. All I was doing was watching Groucho running the 16 millimeter machine. And I said, Groucho, I remember seeing that movie when I was a young guy in Brooklyn. He says, what theater? I said, the Bushwick. He says, no, it was the Flushing. But anyway, there he was, and at this point he was very frail. The mustache was gone. He wore the beret. He had a little cane, and he had this lady who took care of him named Erin Fleming. And when we left there, he said, let's take a picture,
Sure.
and we took a picture with Groucho Marx. And the picture has disappeared.
Oh, jeez. Oh,
But
no.
the memory is still with me.
Sure.
And I did say one other thing to him about the movie. I said, "You made poor people rich."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So that's one of the things. And then working with Ann on the Ed Sullivan Show is
Sure.
always one of the. It has to be one of the highlights of my life. And then having two kids in the business who went into the business. I didn't want them in the business. I didn't want Ben or my daughter Amy to be actors. I said, "Who needs this?"
Right.
But we managed to get through with the two of them, and both of them are performing in their own way.
Because I was going to ask you about Ben. Because I have an 18-month-old myself, and I'm thinking, do I want him to follow in my footsteps at all? And I certainly don't have a luxurious career by any stretch, but I think to myself, I'm not going to push him. And it sounds like you didn't push him, and you didn't. It sounds like maybe you pushed him in the opposite direction to not do it.
Yeah, I don't encourage people saying you'll get them down to an audition,
Right.
for commercials that they do with young kids. I think the thing with Ben is that he was on my back a lot when I was working for coming up with the material with Ann. So one day I gave him a Super 8 Fuji camera. I says, "Here, get out of here, do something." He was 10 years old.
No kidding.
That was my inner thought. I wanted him. And he actually went down on the street and he did a movie with all the kids in the neighborhood, Upper West Side. And he called it Murder in the Park, which was really what was happening in the 70s right across the street.
Okay.
And the movie was his first film, and my daughter Amy was very affected by Karen Black in Airport 75, which I played the guy.
Yeah.
And they did a version of that, which Ann played, Dawn played. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm mixing up my assistant, my wife, and my daughter. But she played Karen Black, and Ben played Charlton Heston, and they took a paper plane, which they made, and they threw it across the bathtub, and that was the movie that they made that dealt with that.
Mm-hmm.
And they used to do funny things in the house, the two of them. I mean, they did. They had a 33 and a third version of Phantom of the Opera, and they started putting that on and playing it and dramatizing all the roles. I never stopped them. And so they went through all that kind of phase, but I never said anything to them about being in this business. But they did travel with us a lot. They were there while Ann and I were rehearsing all the Sullivan sketches.
Sure.
And we had a small 5-room apartment, and they used to hear all the stuff that was going on. We had a sketch called Hate, in which Ann and I are arguing in the scene, and the lines went, Ann says to me, "I hate you," and I said, "You hate me? You don't know what hate is."
Right.
"I hate you. I hate you" with hot heaping hunks of hate. Amy, who was about 3 years old, walks into the room while we're doing this, and she's crying, says, "Mommy, Daddy, fight?"
Oh.
I said, no, Mommy, Daddy, rehearse.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of weeks later, we were actually fighting, and Amy walked in smiling and said, "Mommy, Daddy, rehearse." I said, "No, Mommy, Daddy, fight." So they were brought up with this kind of thing, and they traveled with us to Vegas, and when we were playing at the clubs with the Supremes and all the other folks, and what they used to do is, we were working and rehearsing. They went into Circus, and they were playing the slots, which was, they got us off our hands and our consciences,
Yeah.
But they found their way around, and they were also in the pool with the Pips.
Oh, nice.
Who were playing there at the time, Gladys Knights and the Pips, and so they were playing with the pool with the Pips while we were working on stage there at this place called Vegas. It was quite an experience.
That is a great story, a good story. And then of course, a lot of people. I think younger folks probably know you from Seinfeld and of course King of Queens, which are two just fantastic comedies, and you play kind of a similar character in both of those sitcoms. How does, as an actor and a comedian, how do you go about becoming Jerry Stiller into Frank Costanza or Arthur Spooner? I mean, what's your process?
My process is, it took many years to do this. I don't have a character. I just take it from what's going on in front of me, from the other actor. And when I listen to the other actor, I see where their brains are coming from. on some level, rather than come up with a characterization, or I'm doing an uncle or a grandfather or a guy I saw on the street, I just let what's happening inside myself and just use it. And luckily, in a show like, let's say, the Costanza show, I call it that now. I turn it into my show.
Okay, good.
Which I shouldn't do, you know.
Yeah, sure.
But I got hired by Larry David, and I actually turned the show down at the time because I was working on a show in New York.
Sure.
And they called me again, and the first thing he said to me, "You're going to be working with a woman, your wife. Her name is Estelle Harris. She does a lot of screaming and hollering, and I want you to play the opposite. Play like the Thurber man, the quiet guy, you know, the good contrast." And I took it from her. She was giving me this screaming, "You're the one who ruined his life. You were never there for him." Talking about Jason.
Sure.
You were an absentee father. So instead of just saying what the lines were at that time, I ad-libbed my own lines. "You're the one who slept in bed with him.
Yeah.
You made sandwiches from the middle light. You took away his manhood." And everybody started screaming. And the character came out of that relationship that came from Estelle, God bless her, because there was no. This was a pure person. I didn't have to hold back with Estelle like I did with Ann, because you know when you're married to somebody who's your comedy partner,
Right.
you gotta watch what you say. You know, Sonny and Cher, you know, they had a tough time because you know there was such competition. Yeah, well. Sherry and Ann were in the same boat, but
Sure.
I was lucky enough to find Estelle Harris, who came into my life at this point, and we bounced.
And that there's a instant chemistry, it seems, on the air. We can see it, I think, on the show, the chemistry between you and Estelle. And I think you were able to feed off from that quite a bit. And now,
also, George, Jason Alexander, one of the most incredible guys who played my son, of course. Jason is another one who would come up to me and get me through things, you know, because I was so new in the part, and he really kind of well, once I had a problem with having sat on the Fusilli Jerry, which was a piece of macaroni that was shaped like a trophy, and I sat on it, and of course I had to go to a proctologist.
right.
And so I have to come back from the hospital. They're all worried about me, Estelle and Jason. And so I'm coming back through the door, and Jason says to me, "Why don't you take with you an inner tube tire so you can sit down?" I mean, so they're all helping me through this. Same thing with Michael Richards. You know, when I did the one which we're talking about now,
the Brosier, the man's ear?
Not so much the man's ear, but the one with the I'm sorry, I'm stumbling because I'm so excited about this. Anyway, Michael was also helpful when we were doing the aluminum pipe.
Right, the Festivus bowl.
Festivus.
Right.
So he says to me, you know, when you come into the restaurant and you're dragging the pipe, he says, drag it on the ground so we could hear the noise from the pipe.
Sure.
Yeah, and you know, so everybody was helping me through all of this show, and going back to the original point is, I just took it from whatever they were throwing at me. I took it and used it. I could say, well, in retrospect, I can always say I was doing my father. I mean, couldn't say it at the time. I said I wasn't using my father, who was a New York City cab driver during the Depression, who worked very hard, who had a kind of as a comedian, he felt when he took me to vaudeville shows, I was about 5 years old, he if a comedian was terrible, he'd scream out, "Faker, faker!" And I'd be sitting there and I was saying, "My God, who is this guy?" And he really was funny himself. At family meetings, he'd get up and play silly things, you know. And he put on my cousin's fur coat, put a hat on, and put a flower in his mouth and sing Carmen. You know, my mother said the man's out of work and he's doing Carmen. But so this, in retrospect, whenever I think of who was coming through my inner sanctum or my inner voice, or call it whatever it is which haunts you, I call it there's a word that Jung had for it. It's collective unconscious. I'll
Okay.
put it that way.
All right.
This was my collective unconscious. Now, there might have been other things that were going on deeper than before my father or grandfather, but I allowed some of the stuff, whatever was coming through this pipeline, coming through my mouth. And the most beautiful thing was that they let me do it. That's
Right.
what made that Seinfeld show wonderful. They let all the actors do it. There was a freedom there that I never experienced before or after in my entire life as an actor.
Really, because that was going to lead to the question I was going to ask you, because I know that your career, really a lot of it, and especially now with the new stuff you're doing online, you spent with your wife. And so, are you more in a comfort zone when you're working with her, or do you enjoy kind of being away from her for a while?
Well, working with Ann, it's like being in the comfort zone of life.
Sure.
You know, you can do nothing wrong with Ann. With the others, you have to obey the rules. You know,
Right.
They have a line, you got a line, and you blend it, and it looks very spontaneous. But with Ann, we don't even know what's going to be coming up on this internet show, which
Sure.
we do now, which we've been doing. The beauty of that is that we take a subject and we run with it, and Ann does not know what I'm saying or about to say. And if I make notes on what I think I'm going to say, and she says, "Do not show me this,"
Mm-hmm.
so it comes out absolutely spontaneous, and I say stupid things, and
Right.
she kind of corrects me, and then we take 2 minutes of that, and I mean some of these wonderful episodes. I mean, I'm not plugging it
Sure.
right now, except
Yeah.
it's wonderful. I mean, the one I remember thinking of Massachusetts right now because we're in Boston. There's one about I called it the one about during Thanksgiving time. I talked about illegal immigration, and
Right.
the thing that hit me first was, what was they're talking about Arizona. What about Massachusetts? When the Pilgrims came over, landed in Provincetown, that was illegal immigration.
Right. Right.
And then the Puritans went in, and they came down, and then the Huguenots went down to Baltimore. Well, this place was all illegal immigration, and I made that point, you know, in that particular sketch, because the holiday brought that on. When they were talking about LeBron James going into when he was going from Cleveland to New York, maybe, and then ending up in Miami. He was doing a lot of interviews, and the thing that really hit me at the time was all they were doing, these guys were making such good salaries,
Right.
and they were selling sneakers.
Right.
So all I did was talk about sneakers, and and how the sneakers were the issue, really. It had nothing else to do. And so that kind of took over. When Tony Curtis died that week, I looked in the paper, and these are subjects that came up as we were getting ready to prepare for each show. I said, geez, I went to school. He went to the same school as I did, high school. And when he died, I said, Tony Curtis, my God, he went to Seward Park High School. That's where I went, and had worked in the same workshop, the New School for Dramatic Workshop with Tony.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, did he ever make a pass at you? No, he passed me right by.
Right.
I mean, but Tony never got an Academy Award. And we every actor can identify with other actors. I mean,
Sure.
we felt, he deserved something more, for his life. And then I said to myself, well, gee whiz, how does an obituary affect myself? Because when Ann, I have to tell you quickly, when Ann's dad died
Mm-hmm.
in 1975, he died up at up in Boston, the Jewish hospital in Boston,
Okay.
of a heart attack. There was a meeting of the American Radiator Company. We were up there, and he died there. And when it was over, Ann said, well, you got to get my father a good obituary. I said, what? What do you mean I got to get him? Yeah,
Right.
because I want my father to be known. So I called up we had a press agent.
Mm-hmm.
I said, David, I got to get a little bit for my father, good bit. He said, what did he do? I says, well, he babysat Ann and myself while Amy and Ben while we played these clubs like Cleveland, wherever we were. He says, that's not going to get no obituary. I says, well, what else can I do? He says, well, I said, what about this? I said, he wrote all our comedy material. He said, that's great. So, believe it or not, we actually got an obit in the New York Times that said E.J. Mira, creator of comedy material for Stiller and Mira, and which was, of course, a total misinformation.
Sure.
And but what happened as a result of that? Well, at the Knights of Columbus, where he was part of Eddie Mira, his best friend said to Ann, "You know, Ann, your father was such a wonderful guy." He said sometimes he paid the rent for you guys. Sometimes he took you out to dinner, but he never gave it away that he wrote all that material.
Right. Very good. That's great.
So things like that were part of our life, and I can tell you there's a couple of stories and that'll go on and on.
Well, Jerry, you know what? We've doubled the amount of time they told me I could have with you. So I thank you so much for being on the show. And the website again for the new online series with you and your wife Ann. What's the website address for that?
It's called StillerandMira.com through Yahoo, and they're just 2-minute bits. They're completely spontaneous, nothing. But this week we're talking about the homeless.
Yeah, I saw that one this morning.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw that one.
Yeah.
And how we had, and I just talk off the top of my head how, I'm just giving it away, but a homeless woman offered me sexual favors. I talk about that. Yeah. And says, what? You can say that? Well, you never know where we're home. And I have a tweet now that's coming back where I want a homeless person to go into business for their own. I say when they buy a newspaper, you finish reading newspaper, put it in a cellophane bag, give it to a homeless person, let him resell that at half the price.
That's right.
So he's no longer homeless, but he's earning something, Right. And I and I know the newspaper people, they get PO'd at me the same as, but you do anything in this world to survive.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on the show, Jerry. Jerry Stiller, legendary comedian. Thank you for the laughs for so many decades and new laughs, too, in the new online world that you and your wife, Ann, are involved with, StillerandMira.com. So thank you so much for being on the show, Jerry Stiller.
Thank you. And my